what collective disorders do people suffer from that stop them from engaging in the UFO phenomenon?
TED, truth embargo disease, I mean, that's a possibility. They suffer from truth embargo syndrome, which is to say that they've allowed themselves to sort of go with the status quo. And the government spent decades to isolate, ghettoize the issue for what they felt were national security reasons of great importance. Not in great disagreement about that. I certainly wouldn't want to have been in their shoes in 1947 when, about the time they realized that the Soviets are going to have nuclear weapons, they're going to have missiles, and unless we did some sort of preemptive war right then, and there were a number of our generals that wanted to go to war with the Soviet Union immediately after World War II, that we were going to be facing a nuclear adversary with a pretty substantial ideological difference with us. And we just finished a major war, and this one, the next one, if it were nuclear, would make the previous two world wars look like nothing. And then ETs are everywhere. Possibly because of the nuclear situation, the creation of the bombs, the dropping of them in Japan. It may very well be that that's a threshold, that when a civilization crosses that, they then get involved. Which I'd love to know someday. I have no way of knowing that, but I'd love to know the truth, which means I'm going to have to, ET's going to have to tell me. But they've got extraterrestrials, they've got a vehicle, they got it Roswell, and probably others. There's evidence for, 60, 70 crashes. A good book on that is Magic Eyes Only by Ryan Wood, where he just examines the evidentiary base for about 70 crashes. Fantastic. They got vehicles, they don't know what the tech is, they don't know what they might do with it, can it be weaponized, they don't know what the ET intentions are, they don't know what the Soviet intentions are. They got a mess, and so the thing is, look, we're going to have to deal with the Soviet Union and with the classic clandestine services, and we're going to deal with the ET issue with the clandestine services, and it's basically a 2-for-1, meaning that virtually everything that they might put in place, techniques, concepts, protocols to address the Soviet threat, would be to address the ET threat. Only that second part couldn't be acknowledged. And their decision was to go that way. A good plan, a logical plan, and maybe the right decision. So they started building a truth embargo seriously after the July 1952 events, where these craft turned up all over Washington. Some kind of a statement to Washington. Exactly what that statement was, we don't know. But the government realized they had to get serious about the truth embargo, which they'd been sort of practicing informally since Roswell. And they had no trouble. From Roswell to 52, there were a lot of sightings. You had some space brothers coming out, but overall, they weren't too concerned. I think they felt, we can contain this. And then the ETs just turned over Washington in big numbers. And they realized they can do that anytime they want to. So if we don't really start funding a major effort to intellectually ghettoize this issue, create the National Enquirer, create the Weekly World News, stuff them full of silly UFO stories, undermine the researchers, put out deliberate misinformation, whatever it took, all the skills that they applied against the Soviet threat, they would have to do. Or the public would eventually force them, on ET reality. And so they launched this truth embargo, which eventually became institutionalized, meaning it was status quo. You just did it. You just went along with it. You didn't need to ask why. What was that song by Hornsby? That's just the way it is. That's just the way it was. Not only for the public, for the press. Don't ask about UFOs at the military. They're not going to answer. They're not going to answer you, so don't bother. And they might not let you in the door the next time. Okay, it's subtle stuff, but very effective. So after the Cold War ends, that huge problem with the Soviet Union is gone. The Soviet Union's gone. And we're all capitalists now. So the barrier really to possibly moving forward in disclosure drops, and then the question is, will they act upon it? And that's when the term TED comes in, right? Truth embargo disease, because people had caught the disease during the really intense embargo that went on between 47 and 91 and through 91, and they couldn't cure it. And so the Cold War's over, but where's the move to disclosure? Where's the move to really get at this issue now? Because that threat was dealt with. No, really wasn't there. And other logistical issues, I think, developed for the government that made it, in their view, inconvenient to disclose the ET presence. And so we just kept going along with it. But that's the government's decision. The media, from 91 to the present, has had more and more information and evidence piled on top of the other, with the witnesses coming forward and countries taking certain actions and FOIA documents, all this stuff. And the media is still not acting on it. Right? And what's the threshold for them? We know what the threshold was for the Monica Lewinsky story. One dress launched 10,000 reporters. Here's a good analogy, the Iraq War. As we started to move in the Iraq War, or in that direction, there was a lot of concern. Imagine if, say, only 20% of the papers bothered to cover that, and the other 80% didn't. People were going, wow, that's a little odd, right? And if they only covered it for a few weeks and then dropped it as the war developed, people go, what? So, yeah, there's some coverage, but is it appropriate to the issue? Well, I can assure you it's not, and they have a long ways to go. And so the media really still has truth embargo syndrome, truth embargo disease. They haven't been able to cure the effects of that and become independent again on this issue and get down to business. We're just trying to cure them. So that's why we brought the cure here to the National Press Club. In other words, we do house calls. Right? I joined. Right? I want to be one. I want to be part of them. You know, I want to break bread with them. And so we brought the X conference, which has been held at the Gaithersburg Hilton for the last 5 years, in Washington metro area, but we brought it to the press club, specifically. 2 blocks from the White House, 13 blocks from the Capitol. We invited, as always, all of the members of the House and Senate, staffers, White House staffers. But but they don't come, because if they did and they were seen at such a conference, then people would want to know, why are you at that conference? And that's not something you do when you got TED, right? And you got truth embargo disease. So this year we live broadcast it. We had enormous technical problems we're still trying to figure out. So much was going wrong in so many ways that we're going, this is a little bit odd. So we're going to look into this and just see if maybe we got a little tampering going on here. It happens. In which case I'm thrilled, you know, even though I was driven crazy by these problems throughout the conference. Hundreds of phone calls and emails that I had to deal with because of the tech issues that were just everywhere on this conference. But the idea of the live stream, and this is very significant. Obviously, there's plenty of videos on the internet, no question. YouTube, you can download videos about UFO issues and witness stuff all day long. I understand. But it's not the same as a live event that's happening in real time on important issues being held at, say, the press club. But you, the reporter, you, the member of the White House staff, you can't be down there hanging out with people that are, it's not a matter of whether they believe extraterrestrials are here. Because a lot of the people working for Congress and for the White House know that extraterrestrials are here, just on their own intellectual power. They don't need to be briefed by the head of the CIA. They figured it out on their own. Either way, they can't afford that, but they can watch it online. It's $24, watch it online in their office, in their home, and see what's going on. So again, we're making it easier. We're bringing it to them. Here's the story. Here's the facts. Here's the witnesses. Here's the activists. Here's the research. And it's real. What are you going to do? So, with any luck, future X conferences may have 5, 10, 15,000 people watching online. And that's the dynamic of what's happening. I registered as a lobbyist on this issue in 1996, July of 96. I was the first human being to ever do that. And that was interesting, and it got a lot of press, I must admit. But it was press more of an oddity kind of thing. The first dude to ever register on the extraterrestrial phenomena issue? Wow, how much is he being paid? And the answer was, well, nothing, which explains why nobody else has done that, signed up since then. But I realized pretty quickly that Congress, while we weren't looking, had turned into a block of cement. And essentially it was non-functional. Right? It was DOA. There may be stuff going on down there, but it was heat with no light. And it was a waste of time. When I say it's a block of cement, I just don't mean with respect to the UFO issue. I mean with respect to everything. And if we've clearly seen that, it has become a dysfunctional, non-productive body who, just to do something basic, has to contort itself into a massive Gordian knot in front of the world to see, and it's really rather painful to watch, you know. It's like, you know, I mean, Congress has got to expend $1 million and 46 votes just to agree on what to have for lunch. Well, that's fine, but that's not what we're paying them for. So I shifted the focus of PRG from the get-go to the media, which is one of the reasons we have a media. You see, that's the reason why the First Amendment really matters. The First Amendment is important. I mean, look, the First Amendment means that you can walk to the city square and you can say anything, basically, virtually anything, and you have every right to do it. You can't force yourself into somebody's home. You can't jump up in the middle of a theater, another performance on private property and do that without being asked to leave. But in terms of your fundamental right to say anything you want, we have that, and we know that it's important. But the real First Amendment component that matters in terms of maintaining the social contract in the United States is the press. Now, I believe the founders knew that. They just weren't thinking, gee, wouldn't it be great if all the farmers in the colonies could go out in the field and scream anything they wanted? No. They were empowering organized speech, organized writing, and journalism, and freeing it from the state. And that is one of the most important legs upon which the U.S. Republic stands. And when the press fail us, we take the heavy hit. In the early days of the country, a press failure wasn't a big deal. They might not necessarily be addressing an issue properly, but the country moved slowly. It took probably 2 weeks just to find out what was happening in Washington if you lived in Illinois. And the country was complex, but it wasn't anything like it is now. I think the founders knew that. And so now we have this enormously complex state with a vast army, huge communication complexes, and huge information, intelligence operations, nuclear weapons. And it's capable, if it were a hiccup, to destroy the whole world. You know, somebody wakes up and has a bad day and misreads a radar report and starts launching missiles out of Kansas, and the next thing you know, we're all living in the Stone Age. This is not something the founders had to do. And so when you have a system that complex, it's absolutely essential the press is able to look at everything, check everything, investigate anything that looks funny, and report it back to the people. So the people can decide what to do about it. And if it doesn't do that, then things start going wrong real fast. And you don't have to wait 20 years or 10 years. You can have a problem in a week. The press can fail to get on something, and a week later there are dramatic consequences for the country. A lot of people could die. That's the way the world is now. The press has lost sight of that. The press is now being well paid. More power to them. But when you get well paid, you start to think more about the pay and less about the job. And we have this kind of ongoing joke about how you don't see anything really substantive from the media or even hear much until the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and then all of this hubbub about who gets to sit at what table and sit next to what movie star. And you got the president doing stand-up comedy, and you're wondering, okay, well, this is all nice, but what have you done in the previous 12 months that so impresses us with your investigative power and the revealing of uncomfortable and difficult stuff that we can address? What have you done in the last 12 months that we should just be amused at watching you drink lots of booze while the president does stand-up? I mean, look, work hard, give us the goods, party. When you're getting it wrong or doing nothing at all, and when you're failing on the issue of the ET issue of great magnitude, I don't really care about your problems at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. So this is we got a serious situation here that needs to get resolved. We need journalists like Sarah McClendon, lots more, independent, tough, not in it for the money, though I hope you get paid enough to live on. And the X conference in 2010 was dedicated to Sarah McClendon. my friend, who died a number of years ago. There aren't many of her left, I can assure you. So, is the media going to become corporatized? Is it going to become a state organ? Are the members of the press corps just going to sit there and ask pretty much innocuous questions, and anytime anybody asks something off the wall, laugh? Are they going to sit by and let a major reporter like Helen Thomas be basically shut down by the press office for months, if not years, and not boycott the place? Not picket the White House press corps? The room, rather? They should have gotten up and said, until you ask a question of Helen Thomas, we're not coming back in this room. They didn't do that. So, the Paradigm Research Group launched in November the 5th of 2008, the Million Facts on Washington. And this was a very carefully planned operation. I say operation, carefully planned advocacy initiative. First, we did a lot of media and got people ready to send lots of letters and emails to the transition headquarters of the new president, Barack Obama, saying we want the truth about the extraterrestrial presence. We want disclosure, the files. We want it all. We want it now. Okay. And then when he got in the White House, we shifted the address to the White House, which included a fax number. And for the next 4 months, we were sent, the letters were going in. And they were coming in from all over the world, not just the U.S., other countries, no problem. And the message was disclose. Well, by June the 1st, or May the 31st, he hadn't disclosed. He'd been in office about 4 months. So we then shifted the focus to where we intended to go all along, which was then the letters and faxes and emails were being directed to the White House Correspondents Association to give to the White House Press Corps. And those questions were asking something different. They were asking and demanding that the White House press reporters and those other political reporters covering the CIA, the Department of State, the Department of Defense, start asking the tough, appropriate questions about the ET issue. We listed 13 pretty interesting politically based questions on the website with the links to the documents and the photographs that proved that they were valid. We did their work for them. And so those letters have been going in and still going in for nearly 11 months. Now what's interesting about that is that there have been some attempts by some reporters to ask them about this correspondence. Meaning, you know, how much have you gotten and what is it saying? And they won't respond. They will not answer your phone call and they will not answer your email. In other words, they won't say, we're not getting any correspondence, or we're getting some, but it doesn't matter, or these people are all insane. They're saying nothing. And then on C-SPAN, about, I don't remember, it's been about a year, doing a morning show, Robert Gibbs was asked about this correspondent. Now that's notable because Gibbs, being the White House press secretary, was in a position to fully know about the correspondence that was being sent to the White House and the transition office. He was right there with Obama. And because he's the White House press secretary, he also is fully aware of the correspondence going to the White House press corps. And when he was asked about it, he didn't answer. Now why? Well, they got truth embargo disease. In other words, if I acknowledge we're getting correspondence, then those rascally press are going to ask me to see it. Or what's in it, and then I gotta tell them what's in it, and then they may ask me about the questions that are being raised by the writers, and then I may have to answer those, and that gets me into the ET issue, and as I am well versed on, you're not allowed to talk about that. You see, that's how the disease works. Well, I would like to cure Robert Gibbs of his truth embargo disease, and all of the reporters in the White House, my colleagues and I, the movement would like to. This is not a personal thing. I mean, I actually like Robert Gibbs. I think he's a pretty cool guy. And the rest of the White House press corps, and the press corps covering Hillary Clinton and Leon Panetta, and the people that occasionally talk to John Podesta, they're either going to start answering these questions, or eventually they're going to be forced to by the public, who will get sufficiently irritated that they will start giving him a hard time. And that's everybody's going to look bad. So that's kind of a picture of where things are, but I don't want to be too pessimistic. I do see very significant progress, though still not enough and not soon enough, but progress that helps me believe that we're near a breakthrough and that something's going to happen here shortly that will in fact trigger the disclosure event, and we will get the basic fundamentals about the ET presence.
Do you think that in any way the silence on their behalf when approached about getting correspondence about extraterrestrials and UFOs from the general public, do you think that is them not acknowledging it up front because they are behind closed doors trying to figure out a way to formulate an approach about this? And do you think that's happening?
Well, I ultimately don't know why they're making the decisions they're making, but one can infer some things. Look, I'm going to keep the pressure on, but I think I understand why they're not responding. I understand why they're not even acknowledging it. Not just for the reasons I mentioned. I was being somewhat facetious, but here's the deal. And I believe the Democrats want to do this. I believe that John Podesta coming to this press club in 2002, 2003 and calling for the release of all UFO files was no accident. It was intentional. He wanted it out there, and he knew it would be on YouTube, and he knew it would be there. As some sort of preface to what the Democrats, I think, wanted to do, planning to do, which was to disclose if they had won the 2004 election. But they finally have won the White House, and they're in the White House. If their intention is to disclose, they probably understand that there's no way they can tip their hand. There's no trial balloon they can send up, right? And certainly no leaks, false leaks, or you know what I mean, arranged leaks. Because if anything gets out there at all, that would launch the press. And they would have a media storm on their hands. And it would turn a process that I think they would like to be orderly and proactive, which is good, into chaos. And you've got Hillary Clinton and John Podesta and Bill Clinton and maybe even Barack Obama running down the halls of the State Department and the White House and the Center for American Progress with a bunch of reporters behind them with the cameras held up and the pens clicking away, and they're all demanding, what about this and what about that and what about that? Like paparazzi. They don't want that. And so technically, strategically, they understand that they need to do whatever they have to do to get disclosure ready to go without letting anybody know, and then boom, they do it clean. Now, then the media storm starts, but they're in control. And then they start answering the questions and they start moving the information forward in whatever fashion. And so I understand. So no, I don't expect Gibbs to acknowledge this correspondence. I don't expect John Podesta to comment further on why did you make those statements in 2002. I don't expect Hillary Clinton to come forward and answer questions on why she chose to be involved in the Rockefeller Initiative, why she didn't advise her husband to stop it, why we have letters showing that she actually was reviewing the material, right? I don't expect her to answer why she and her husband went to meet with Rockefeller in '95 at Rockefeller's Wyoming ranch, and she's walking through the woods with Lawrence Rockefeller with a book in her arms entitled Are We Alone by Paul Davies, the astrophysicist, Philosophical Implications on Extraterrestrial Contact. I don't expect her to do that. I don't expect Bill Richardson to really answer any questions in a serious way about why he chose to write that we needed to review the Roswell events because he didn't buy the government's explanation. I don't expect him to do that. And I don't expect Leon Panetta, who was the chief of staff for Bill Clinton, while the Rockefeller Initiative was going on, Rockefeller Initiative, if anybody wants to Google, because, again, if they respond at all, they launch 1,000 media ships. And so I understand, but they have to understand that this event, this disclosure event, has to take place. And we're not going to stop. And so understanding their dilemma is not the same as giving them a free pass. No, 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 no. We're going to press this to the limit. And if it results in a media mess, and they're being chased all over Washington, D.C. by 10,000 reporters, that's on them. It's not on us. They could have disclosed any time after the Cold War ended. Mostly they came up with excuses not to. Some may be better than others. So it's on them. But they still have time. They still have time to do this. But there's another possibility, another problem. If the administration does not get together with the military intelligence leaders, particularly those that have first-hand knowledge of the ET management, and arrange, to come to an understanding about how disclosure should take place, and get it done, another country's going to do it. Remember when Russia put the first dog into space, and then they put the first satellite up, and we were just fit to be tied. Oh, it was awful. And we had to launch a space program and catch up. We had the space race, and it was all interesting. But we were mortified that the backwards Soviet Union, with their cheap clothing and boring movies, had just beat us into space. Well, that's nothing. That was nothing compared to what they're facing now. Because if the People's Republic of China, or the new capitalistic country Russia, or even a very nice emerging country that's going to be a major player in the world stage, Brazil, or even our good friend France, holds a press conference tomorrow with a bunch of gun camera footage from their defense aircraft, and says, there's ETs here, we've known about it, and we feel it's time that we want to tell you this. Or Brazil chooses to do it. And then the U.S. has got to go, oh, why did you do that, Brazil? We've been planning to do that ourselves, and now we got to admit to it. It's so awkward. Or the People's Republic of China. History books would be talking 1,000 years from now about the great People's Republic of China took the great step to inform its 1.3 billion people that they weren't alone in the universe, right? And then proceeded to inform them and help them acclimate to this. And then, but sometime later, the United States issued a small press release saying, yeah, they got it right, and we'll see what we're going to do about it. That's, yeah, that ain't Sputnik. That's a massive deflation of American prestige, mendacity, or truthfulness rather. And it fits with the processes underway right now, where the U.S. is sort of collapsing inward. I don't think we'd ever recover from it, in my opinion, in a way. And the irony would be just too good, right? Just too good. The Communist Party, the People's Republic of China, who now is carrying several $1 trillion worth of paper, also ends the truth embargo that we started. I could go down the list. I mean, the irony. France ends the truth embargo. And that's the real possibility, because France was the first nation that broke ranks with the policy of the United States on this. They sent a clear message to the United States in 2000, 10 years after the Cold War, 9 years after the Cold War was over, that their patience was wearing thin. What was the form of that message? Was it a diplomatic report? No. They could have sent a back channel wire through the intelligence community, but that would have done no good. They knew that. They needed to do something public. But if it was formal from the French government, that would have been a bit of a slap across the face, and then we'd have to have a duel, and you know how that is. So what they did was, there was a group called the Cometa Committee that was dealing with national security issues, made up of a lot of pretty high-level former officials and military people. I mean, it was about as governmental a non-governmental organization as you can imagine. And so they just happened to issue in late 1999 the Cometa study, which took 2 years. And they released it in France, in French. VSD magazine probably publicized it the most. Very little coverage in the US, except by Leslie Kean, who got a couple of articles in, which is good, but overall, nothing much here. And this report concluded that the only logical explanation for the phenomenon was extraterrestrial. And then discussed why the US government has had to maintain such secrecy. Hello? Right? And The U.S. government had no response to that, but I'm sure it got the message. Was there disclosure in 2001, 2, or 3? No. Okay. So in 2004, 13 years after the end of the Cold War, and well into the Iraq War, which France was not thrilled about, if I recall, France announces they're releasing thousands of UFO files from their archives to the internet. I think they chose a site, the CNES, the French space program site. It was crashed immediately because of the huge numbers of people around the world that instantly went there. Right? Message resent. And then they have released thousands since then, but then the United Kingdom then followed and started the beginning of a time-released, chronologically ordered release of thousands of files. And then Denmark and Sweden, Brazil, a lot happening there, files being released. Uruguay, Australia, Canada, and then recently New Zealand. What's the message? It's simple. You need to end this truth embargo, United States. We understand your lead on this. We've been playing with you, playing ball with you, but you need to do it. Or what? Well, we're going to do it. Will there be consequences? Possibly, yeah. Does it matter less and less each passing day? Yeah. What are we going to do to the Chinese? I guess we could say, if you disclose, we'll never pay off the debt. And they'll say, fine, buy your underwear from the Antarctic or something, because we're not selling it to you anymore. Look, this is turning into a ridiculous situation. It's ludicrous, it's bizarre, it's Lewis Carrollian, it's Rube Goldbergian, it's nuts, right? And it's making everybody look bad. One of these countries is going to disclose. The U.S. probably should be the lead. A joint disclosure between a number of countries, first world countries, would be okay. I don't know if they could pull it off, frankly, because I think it would leak and it would blow up in their face. But that would be fine. UN would never happen, but would be logical. But they need to do it, they need to do it soon. The United States is running out of time for sure. Barack Obama pretty much now owns this truth embargo, so it's going to become more and more of a problem for him to explain, why did you do it in the first month, Barack? Or month 5? Or month 12? What were you waiting for? You think we didn't need that ET technology that we know has been in development for 6 decades? You don't think we got problems out here? You don't think that, you know, we would like to replace oil with possibly a new energy physics because those craft are not running on kerosene? You think we like the idea that the entire Gulf is going to turn into an oil slick? Why'd you wait? His chance for a massive political legacy of enormous importance is slipping away, but just about everything else is slipping away from this new president, this young Kennedy-like president. I can't even begin to describe the loss in historical prestige to the president, to the country, if somebody continues to advise him that, why don't you just wait, it'll all pass over. That's the worst advice ever given to any president, ever. I invite him to listen to Edgar Mitchell, who is a pretty formidable human being and an honest man who's done nothing but serve his country and the public and disclose the extraterrestrial presence as soon as possible in an orderly fashion. That's what PRG's work is about. That's what the Disclosure Project's work was about. It's what Exopolitics World Network, the Extraterrestrial Phenomenon Political Action Committee, and in October it will be what the next major event of the Xcon, the Maritime Research Group, is about. And that is a new event that will be also annual, 6 months apart from the X Conference, and it is called Contact 2010. The website is contact2010.com, all letters, no numbers. And we're now going to do what had to be done eventually, inevitably, is we're going to move the most difficult of these exopolitical questions to the forefront. And I'm talking about direct physical contact between extraterrestrials and human beings, which has been going on for a very long time. It is worldwide, and the numbers are in possibly and likely the millions. So we're going to hold a conference at the National Press Club and bring contactees, some of the most articulate and most comprehensive and best remembered stories, personal stories, and bring those here to present them. and we will bring the best researchers in the world to back them up and talk about their findings. And this will be the first major conference dealing exclusively with contact in 18 years since the Alien Abduction Study Conference held on the MIT campus and co-organized by Dr. Johnny Mack of Harvard and Dr. David Pritchard of MIT. 18 years it's been. Now we're going to do another one. And in 2011, we'll do Contact 2011. And so now the contactees are coming forward. And that's just going to make it tougher, because these stories are very challenging and the exopolitical implications are enormous. And the government simply cannot run from the hard stuff, right? If the government's position is, look, it's hard enough just getting elected, my God, how can we deal with tough issues? It's hard enough raising the funds to get elected. How can we possibly find the time to deal with people that are in direct contact with extraterrestrials? Please leave us alone. Can you form your own groups? Can you help yourself? We're just the elected representatives serving at the Capitol. We can't deal with this. Could you take care of it for us? Is that it? Is that what it's come to? Because if it is, it's time to turn out the lights.
The one thing I'm curious about is I really like how well you highlighted the dynamic of other countries coming forward and putting the pressure on the United States to actually do something about this and come forward and start disclosing stuff. But isn't there a lot of special interests behind keeping this secret, and is there too much pandering going on, that kind of societal pressure around the world of other countries disclosing stuff? Does that special interest trumps that?
Anytime you have something of this magnitude that's affecting countless interests, you have an incredibly complex equation. There's no question about it. Though it's being overstated, I think, in the modern time. Look, in 1970, if the military intelligence cross-management committees, cross-agency committees addressing this issue, if we're holding a meeting in the 27th basement level of the Pentagon or wherever, and somebody said, look, raise your hands if you think it's time to disclose the ET presence to the American people. And if there happened to be a member of the oil industry who was involved in classified programs and part of the committee sitting there, who had to decide whether to raise his hand, this is like 1970, I could see him turning to the person next to him, some general or admiral, and going, how's that energy physics coming out? Are they making progress with that? And the general would say, oh yeah, we're making great progress. Don't disclose. I understand that. Nuclear energy industry? Don't disclose. All right? But the fact is that it's clear now that disclosure could lead to an enormous economic boom. It could lead to all kinds of wonderful possibilities that would benefit everyone, including the powers that be. It just might force them to work a little bit to change their modus of operation and refocus. I clearly would think that certain vested interests that would be wounded at all by a disclosure event would have voiced their opposition in the 60s and 70s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, 80s. However, I don't think they would have carried the day. I think the military intelligence managers ultimately made their decision on the national security interest. Which doesn't mean that the oil industry was going to take out ads in newspapers and spend a lot of that oil profits talking about the ET energy physics we could have or the ending the truth embargo. No, they weren't going to help. That's understandable. But the idea that the nuclear industry or the were in there, and the admirals and generals and the intelligence people are going, it's time to tell the people, and they're saying, no, you're not. We run this show. Not you guys. You're just head of the military, you're head of the CIA, whatever. We're the oil industry, we run this show. No, that's not true. We still have good people running the show. We have special interests getting their way in a lot of cases. But this decision was national security, always has been. So no, I don't expect the oil industry to help. I don't expect the nuclear industry to help. But I don't expect them to go broke in the post-disclosure world. Believe me, they'll be just fine. Because there'll be plenty of opportunity to make enormous amounts of money. And there'll never be anything like free energy. What you'll have is much cheaper energy, maybe even 99 cents or 98 cents on the dollar cheaper. But you still have to build those energy plants with the new physics. You still got to deliver those electrons through wires. And so, but people will use a lot more energy because, let me tell you, if your energy bill would have dropped from $500 a month to like $5 a month, you say, hello, let's party, right? It's mostly truth embargo disease. It's mostly the momentum of the truth embargo carrying forward in time during a period when government is increasingly dysfunctional and can't get anything done. But the ETs haven't gone away, the world's problems haven't gone away, and we have to re-engage it. We've got to get it done, right? I'm sorry about all the difficulties. Doesn't matter, right? It's like a parent going to a child who's 16 and who's having a terrible time. And if it doesn't get an act together, kind of go to prison, maybe end up in, addicted to drugs, not go to college. And the parent could go to the kid and say, oh, look, I just can't deal with this now. So if it's all right with you, I just want you to stay 16 for about another 5 years. So we're just going to freeze you, at that age. You can't get older, and I'll get back to you in about 5 years, and we'll continue your development through to adulthood. Well, you can't do that. They're trying to do that, government right now. They're trying to do that with a whole bunch of things. Just stop and give us 5 years to collect ourselves. No. And in fact, their inability to, quote, get things done is causing just a plethora of problems that are just burying us, You wake up one day, the ice caps are melting. You wake up another day, there's a hole in the ozone. You wake up another day, your pension's gone. A couple of days later, you wake up, your house just is upside down in value. Then you lose your job, right? Then the tundra starts melting in the Great North, and then, China calls in its $1 trillion debt. And then the banking industry collapses, and then. We either get back in the truth business, the press gets back into the press business, the government gets back in the governance business, or let's turn out the lights and call it a day and say, hey, we gave it a good run. I'm thinking Australia, you're thinking Costa Rica, Northern Canada looks nice, we'll have to sneak in, of course, they're not going to let us in. But let's call it a day and give the United States back to those who maybe deserve to have it. Native Americans and the animals and the plants, and let it just kind of rest for a couple of centuries. The disclosure movement is an international growing movement to effectuate the formal acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence by at least one government to start with, and boom, the rest will follow. Hopefully it will have a ripple effect that will affect many other issues. It may be the key variable in a 100-variable equation. I ultimately do feel optimistic that we're about to make a breakthrough, but I also am absolutely convinced that if we cannot let up at all. We have to push this disclosure movement to the limit, because tomorrow somebody's going to nuke somebody, somebody's going to invade somebody, or something else is going to happen to give the dysfunctional government an excuse to go off in another direction and take us down some box canyon for 10, 20 years. And then it may just be too late. And so disclosure has to get done immediately, because, and this is the nice thing about it, disclosure happens, it can never be undone. It's out, it can't be put back in the bag. And so from that moment forward, whatever else happens on this planet or in this country will happen in the post-disclosure world. And every decision, all the billions of decisions that are made every day, will have to take into account the post-disclosure.